So this is what we're here for, to have a little bit of a presentation with members of the innovation community who are going to introduce themselves in a second, and then have a little discussion and hear some information and eat lunch. If you can click forward. So this is a little bit of an overview for today.
Why do you say our audio isn't?
Is that audio?
They can hear us even though it's.
Yeah, it's
not-
coming through here.
Yeah.
Which is not what it looks like on my computer when I join my audio. Okay,
Yeah.
so
It's that computer. No, my.
I believe you.
So, yeah, rough overview, and I think actually now I think I told Jessica, like, oh, we've got some time, but we're gonna probably hustle through it. I know I have most of the content, so I'm gonna hustle for sure through my stuff. Kirsten, you wanna kick off a little bit with some introductory remarks?
I think we did it pretty much with our, why are we here? I think we're good.
Okay, great. If we could skip ahead.
So this is my part. What we started by doing, we all had different interests. We came together. We said, all right, what do we do together as a group? Well, the first thing we need to do is do a survey just of the members of the innovation community. What have our experiences been? What do we see as the problems and possibilities? What kind of research or what more information do we need? And then where do we go from here? And as a result of that, we found one thing was terminology is all over the place. We all use different words. Things need to be defined a little bit more clearly. At SOU, there's community-based learning is one word that's used or a term that's used. Service learning is another. And then what do we do about scholarship? How does that fit into our teaching? Because when someone does community-based learning, usually they're also involved with communities in their scholarship, usually in their service. So how do we take a holistic approach to this instead of just focusing on the teaching? So that was one thing we talked about, and it's still an ongoing question. There's still conflicts and contradictory terminology used across campus. Our experiences were that most of us came to this because we had a positive experience, and so it transformed our learning. Some of us became professors because of our community engaged experiences. It's extremely labor intensive. That's universal across the board. That's not unique to any of us here at SOU. Typically, these kinds of activities are best built on long-term relationships. That's also what makes it so labor intensive. The best service learning projects are based on a relationship that the professor has with a community organization. Maybe they did some research together. They find a good fit to bring that kind of learning experience into the classroom. You bring it into a few classes, but you have to sustain that relationship. The benefit is really high, both for faculty members and for students, but just the burnout rate is really significant. So what were the barriers? We found that through our collective experiences, sometimes students aren't really prepared for the experience. Sometimes students are even a liability. So there are reasons why you might want to keep a class on campus until you find out those students who are really prepared to represent the university and the class well. So there's that. Community partners sometimes don't have the capacity to take volunteers. That's something that I'm trying to really focus on next steps is how do you recognize the work and the labor that community partners put into helping teach our students without compensation? And sometimes they may have the need for help, but they don't have the capacity to support student learning. And so we talked about this barrier of finding the right fit. That takes work. Campus processes can be barriers, and we'll talk about that later, and we've already started to talk about that. We're working actively right now to shore up and strengthen the supports in the tenure and promotion process, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then a bunch of other ideas came up, other ways that we can support this. And really, I would say, to summarize it, the strongest potential we have to better support community-based learning is through existing university structures. We've brainstormed all kinds of innovative ideas that go beyond anything we've ever seen here, even beyond what used to be here. And that's really fun to think about. But the most realistic option is using existing structures, like building in lab sections to go along with the course. So it makes it clear to students that they're going to be doing something outside of the classroom, and it pays the faculty member for that extra work. That's something we do already. It's a zero, it's a it's not an additional cost to the university. That's just one example of how you can build in additional supports using existing university structures.
Is it appropriate to ask a question?
I think so.
So what I didn't see you mention is an issue that we run into. I push a lot of paid internships, but particularly in CS, we get a lot of requests for unpaid internships. It seems pretty clear that what the business is looking for is free labor without contributing to the student's learning. And I just didn't know if that was kind of unique to my division and the circumstances I've seen, or if that's a common issue, and if you might at some point talk about how you all address that.
So that's a really good question, and it raises a couple of issues. One is our group was specifically focused on community-based learning within the classroom.
Okay.
And so we weren't really talking about internships because that's its own animal. That's a major issue. Whenever I've supervised internships, one of the things we look for, and we have the community partner sign a contract, that the work needs to be meaningful and educationally based. It can't be like, go get the coffee and make the copies, you know.
Well, we turn down some, and
Exactly. Yeah.
causes, you have to be very careful how you turn them down.
So the point is yes, that's a universal experience and a universal problem.
Sorry to interrupt. I don't know if you can hear me, but we can't hear anymore. Oh, did we actually lose the classroom?
Looks like we did. We're working on that now.
Thanks, Bill.
That was really weird because the classroom froze, but I could see the rest of us all like moving and stuff. It felt a little weird.
It might be an issue.
Yeah, we haven't lost them, so it's a connection issue.
Aha, we're back.
Okay, hi.
Okay, break's over.
The difference between service learning and community-based learning, sometimes a classroom doesn't really have the capacity to do true service to the community partner, but they can learn from the relationship. And so it's all a part of finding the right fit. Sometimes the activity you do might be really small in comparison with what the community partner might need. And you may learn from it, but you might not really be in service. So
Yeah. No,
there's a benefit to calling it community-based learning as opposed to
there's a
service learning.
connection for sure in terms of looking at the equity between maybe the student, university, and the community partner, and there could be imbalances or certainly room for misunderstanding on both sides, maybe in different situations, either side really being taken advantage of. And I think about the opposite of your situation, which is to do this in a culturally appropriate way and an ethical way. We don't want to drop into a community agency, disrupt them, have our students have a meaningful experiential experience, and that's it. And we kind of use them for that purpose. I mean, so to do it ethically and responsibly takes those long-term relationships and stuff. Yeah.
Does doing digital work count towards this? Is this in person, only in person, or could it all be remote?
Oh, yeah. We can talk about this more in the conversation section, depending on who wants to talk about what.
Oh, yeah, could I give an
Yeah.
example? Because
Yeah.
it's not totally set yet, but I've been working towards a class at the Crater Rock Museum where students will go out and they're gonna get the Native American collections in order, cleaned up, put in a way that the tribes can actually see and engage with. It's not just a jumbled mess. And work on an exhibit for the museum, but also maybe it'll lead to a return of items to the tribes, right? So it has all these different pieces. But leading up to it and after it, there's also plenty of opportunities for students to do work from home for them. So people can actually there's a lot of photography and updating things to their website. And so anybody who needs to do things not in person at the museum also have that option. So kind of those.
Excellent. So there's another way to think about it too, a good way to set up a partnership with a community partner and a class is to have the community partner pose a question. So this is something we're struggling with or something that we need more information about or something like that. And then have the class tackle it, and you can have the class do it in teams. And then each of them present what their solution is so that the community partner has a variety of proposals to look at. It also builds in redundancies because sometimes students in our classes don't do the work or they don't show up or their work is really poor. And then you at least have something to offer to the community partner. And sometimes that might be proposing I don't know, some sort of media campaign or doing research, all of those things can be done either in person or online. There's lots of different options depending on the nature of the class
Is
and the partnership.
community defined by geography, or is community in general, so it can be across the world?
Oh, it can be across the world. I've partnered with organizations in Turkey before to do work on immigration and refugee issues. So
And it could be communities interfacing, like the one I just mentioned actually has 3 or more communities, right?
So we can come back to this because this is
These
the
are
heart of
great questions,
what,
yeah.
yeah, but let's move forward for now. Because we did more research.
Yes. So we knew early on that we wanted to, I mean, I knew from the beginning, I wanted to know what my colleagues were experiencing, doing, et cetera. So we set out to, Carrie and I mostly write up a survey that we thought would be doable and brief enough, but also comprehensive to give us the information we want. So next slide, please. Carrie, I'm going to start out and feel free to jump in at any time. We didn't really pre-plan this at all, but
Sounds
Carrie did
good.
put a lot of this work together for sure. So we had 60 respondents across all divisions, and the vast majority really are currently doing the work, want to do the work, have done it maybe in the past, but then, kind of shied away for factors that, for reasons we've already mentioned. And very few were kind of like, nope, don't do it, not interested. And so it's kind of like, why did you answer? But it was helpful. Like, it was helpful. No, it's because there are folks for whom it doesn't apply, or they're just whatever, for whatever reason. Next slide. So unfortunately, you can't see the whole thing, but this question was, if you're already doing this, what resources have been helpful? And you can kind of see supports. So departmental support, mentor or colleague support have been some of the most helpful kinds of things. And then prior experience, whether it's at other universities or, in your in your own educational experience. Can you click one more time?
Get that to the left of that, the X or right there. Get rid of that. There we go.
Clay, can you click one more time? And these are some other things. So to the extent to which they had the time, they had prior experience, they were already involved, whether in their own professional lives, personal lives with certain organizations or endeavors in the community, and then they got creative and thought about how can I get my class involved with this, or how can I bring this into my pedagogy? Carrie, anything else you want to add to this slide?
I think that, we'll see this on the next slide too, the sort of challenges, but folks who have that sort of existing relationship to community partners or people would talk about having, like what I'm calling insider identities, but having sort of relationships that are based on our own experiences with community and our own identities in relation to the communities we're working with. That ended up also being a really significant piece when people had that. And it's not something I think we should just take for granted that, that sort of building of those relationships, even when it's external to our work with SOU, can really then benefit SOU and benefit our students and come back into that.
Yeah. Whether we might think about it like social capital or the blurring of the personal and the professional. Yes, it's all about those relationships and identities. Next slide. So this is the one about barriers. And there were many. There were limitations noted, especially related to community partners, related to university sort of barriers, related to concerns about students. Would they be prepared enough? Or on the other side, it's already been mentioned a little bit, our students are really taxed. They're working, they're in school. How fair is it to ask them to go out and do stuff above and beyond? That's why the classroom-based stuff is really cool, because you're in their class time. But if you're asking folks to do stuff outside of class time, how much can you infringe upon that time? And click one more time. Maybe one more time. Oh, there we go. Lots of stuff listed, right? So these start to point the direction at some needs or some ways in which SOU can support better, right? So not knowing where to go, not knowing who are the community partners, and being a little bit perhaps timid about, well, I don't want to go there or ask them because maybe someone else is already there. I think there's a little bit of a sense of like, people have their own thing going on, and maybe like they're, I don't know, I'm just looking at community works. They've been working with them for a while, and they almost don't want to share that for fear that someone else is going to come in and overtax that agency. And without coordination, people don't know. And so there was a little bit of like, I've been doing this, and so let me just keep doing it. But on the flip side, people don't know what's going on, right? So a lot of need in terms of communication, coordination, who's doing what, and then the other barriers, financial, resource, et cetera. Terry, what else do we want to say?
Yeah, I just, one of the things that I noticed when again, when we're going through this data is that in terms of resources that are SOU, right? It's a lot of like hit or miss, one-on-one, like interpersonal relationships, or maybe at the highest, like a departmental support. But in terms of the barriers, a lot of those are, it's not the sort of interpersonal stuff. A lot of it, like with SOU, is those big structural pieces, like a lack of a coordinator, and a lack of, like, again, clear processes, like those sorts of things. So it seems like, we have some people who care, right, on that sort of interpersonal level, but we just lack those bigger sort of structures to support this work.
Okay, next slide. And some reasons why folks haven't. So these are related, right? So they almost anticipated or come up against maybe some of those barriers. So you can see around institutional or community, or, and this is the biggest need, and something that came up is there are certainly some folks who are interested and they don't really know how to do it. That's the biggest bar graph. Concerning their own instruction, their own pedagogy, how do I actually do this? How do I do it responsibly? And then next click. Not having those relationships. So being newer in your process and those challenges, we talked about how is this really valued in terms of promotion and tenure? What is the bang for the buck in terms of my limited time and sustainability? And then not knowing how to do it here, not knowing maybe a little bit how to do it at all. So both those things, especially for, let's say, maybe junior faculty, new to SOU, that kind of compounds. Yeah, let's go to the next one. And so things that folks would like to see. So what's already helping you, or what do you need to get this going? You can see already developed lists of either potential partners or current partners, and then breaking that down, partners and their projects. So partner could be a huge organization, but within that organization could be multiple programs or departments, each with their own potential need and potential for partnership. And then some kind of mentorship. So it was mentioned, I glossed over a little bit. Mentorship was one of those bigger supports, right? So someone in the program or department, or just another colleague who helped them and said, hey, what about here? And have you thought about this? And oh, you should go talk to so-and-so in the service center about this. And this is how you rent the van, and all the different little pieces that come together with mentorship from colleagues. And then time, release time or loading or some other way in which they knew was going to be valued besides just the great experience they're providing for the students, because it is so time consuming. Those are some of the big ones. And I think there's some others. Can you click more? Carrie, what else do we want to say about this?
I think you touched on the important pieces. Thanks.
Awesome. So these are just a couple of quotes. I'm not going to read them, but they represent maybe some of the challenges and some of the really heartfelt sharing for folks who are really doing the work and invested in the work. Takeaways. Those folks who really care, really understand the benefit of this, are doing it, and some of them are challenged by it and are really feeling it. Maybe feeling a little undervalued by colleagues or the university. Okay. Carrie, do you want to add anything to this?
Nope, I think we're good. Thank you.
Quotes speak for themselves. Next slide, please. I tried to do a word cloud. It didn't really come up. We are, one of the outputs we're developing is a pretty comprehensive list of different partners in the community. And they range really, some of them are national groups, every once in a while an international group, but very much local, from environmental groups, different school districts, all the different social service agencies, cultural arts agencies, healthcare places. It's really pretty amazing. And I have lists, and I have actually a narrative that's going to go in a final report that actually has a pretty long list of partners. And I think that's my part's done.
Yeah. Do you have contacts with organizations that do advocacy, for social justice?
For sure. Some of those have been partners. I don't have them, but yes, those have been some of the partners for sure.
So Brooke and Brett took on the issue of how do we improve the barriers that are campus processes?
It's interesting because like I actually think we do have a process that can function, but you have to like know it after having made so many mistakes and missteps and barriers. And so it's interesting because I think Brett and I both like have been pretty successful with our community-based service learning, and we both do it a lot. And we know it's quicker because we know like who needs to be in the conversation from the beginning. Right, but it took me almost 6 years to do that, and also it changes on a fairly rapid, occasion. We have restructuring, we have people who leave and don't get rehired, and I also think we have a disparity between divisions, departments, and like the kind of mentor faculty. If you don't have the people who are above you, like who are also like supporting and like lifting the work with you, then it's really, really hard to get the approvals in a timely manner. If you don't have like that faculty mentor who's a colleague who's already done it, you may not have somebody who can talk you through that process. So, I mean, we really noted quite a few steps, and, even things like reimbursement can sometimes take up to 15 people, to get a reimbursement figured out. And it becomes really frustrating when those are like $10, $15, or with our kind of like mass retirement and people leaving that have been happening and not having replacements, there is a difficulty sometimes getting them like things paid, even sometimes up to a year later. So if you're not paying people who you're partnering with in a timely manner, that can mess up your relationships pretty quickly. And I do a lot of interfacing between, and I think Brett does this too, like between programs on campus and communities and institutions off campus. And so it's usually not just like us and one other organization, but it's like actually like multiple organizations. And sometimes there's like, for example, we have a student group going up to clean up some fencing up at Vesper Meadow in a couple of weeks. And there's both like an internal form and insurance, and then there's like that organization's forms and insurance, right? And it helps when you have somebody like a student worker working with you that can, just like, so right now I know exactly who I would send my student worker to, and they go right up to Patricia, and Patricia's helping them, sort the form stuff out, and Sherston's helping them sort the band stuff out, right? So it's like, wow, this is actually quite easy, but it's only taken me 7 years, right, to get to that point where I'm feeling like I can like call on other folks to help with the lift, right? And that's working better. And a lot of people just don't have the time and the energy to do all of that. Like they don't want to have it be like that challenging. They don't want to constantly be kind of like running up against walls. And so I understand why people end up choosing not to move forward with their projects. But I do think that disparity between divisions is really problematic, right? And I think that our 2 division directors here are probably pretty good examples of division directors that probably support their faculty doing those things, but I don't know that that's true across the entire campus, or that everybody understands it in the same way, or even like knows how to like negotiate those systems in the same way. So I think that's one thing that, we just kind of like talked about. The release time is a huge one, right? Not having actually like designated time that that you can work on it. I think that probably the reason why I felt really successful, maybe Brett, is that I think we kind of like work quickly. The way we work quickly, and so we pivot quickly. But a lot of people need more time to percolate and to think things through, and to like actually like develop some of these relationships. And so when my conversations with other faculty, why they don't want to pursue these things, it often is like, I just ran into this wall after doing all this work, and now I have to do a whole bunch more work to get it to the next wall, and I don't want to do that. And I understand that, that feeling and frustration. You know, and then you're wearing your faculty out and they're not really like able to bring the good energy that they have to the classroom. There's also an issue with like funding. So like when you want to move funding, like say you bring in donations on the foundation side and you want to spend it, so you have to bring it over to the service center side. You know, there's another process there. If you're getting grants for the types of things you're working on, there's huge amounts of money that could be taken out of your grant by the institution for internal institutional stuff. And some of it, like I just learned, like 25% can come out of your grant.
Yep.
And that 25% then can go back to the university to spend on stuff, but you kind of wonder why it can't be spent on the thing that's been like
It can be
identified.
more than 25%.
It can be more, yeah, but the standard right now that gets put into the draft budget is 25, like it can go up or lower depending on the institution too. So we also need a strong grants program and office so that they can help negotiate those different types of grants that have, all of them have different ways they want the budget done, and all of them have different types of like expectations and deliverables and reporting, right? And so I am a person who had some experience with writing grants prior to coming to SOU, so that was helpful. But I know a lot of folks who've never written a grant before, or maybe been a party to a grant, but not ever been the principal investigator, right? And so without like mentorship and support and even maybe like training, on how to do that, I think we actually are like missing out on a whole lot of like money that could be doing some of the things that we're working on. I do think they're working on it though.
We're making some traction there. It's been a challenge, but it's been really helpful to present some examples of where billions of dollars have not come to SOU as a grant, nor the indirect costs that would have come with it to support grants office and to support divisions to feed their indirect costs back into allowing faculty supports in writing grants and things like that. So it's not going to be solved in the next year, so don't get too optimistic. But I do see a path where I have real hope that we're going to get that remedy, especially with so many new faculty who just don't have the experience that they're bringing with them.
Well, and I felt really heartened recently talking to Taylor Smith, who's in the grants offices, and he didn't tell me everything that was happening, but he said that he sees like a kind of a bright new moment arising, and I'm like, okay, cool. Right? So I again, all of these like issues, I want to be really clear. Like, I think people are paying attention to them. I think people are aware of them. I think people are trying to solve them, which is great. But that interface between the foundation and the service center is really, really frustrating. We need also the people who help us in our offices, like the folks who are the specialists, the office specialists, right? To also have the skills to know how those things work. So I don't know that like training is even that everybody's trained up the same way on any level of our hierarchy, and of our like community, like our community here, right? Like I think so it depends on like who has the skills already. If they came in with them, then those are the folks that are helping people figure it out. And if people didn't come in with those skills, they may not be getting training at any level of management. Yeah.
Can you speak to, I don't know if you're gonna get to this, the program that you and Brett checked out?
I'm on my way there.
Right on.
So another thing is the forms, like, and where forms are and how to like access forms and how to fill out forms and what needs to be in the forms. Like there's not necessarily like a tutorial. Like the way I learned to do it here was because I messed up so many times that I eventually got it right, and so now I'm much more capable of doing it. But it was like after doing things the way I thought it needed to be done and then finding out that wasn't the way it needed to be done, or I wasn't the person who got to make the decisions, right? There's like 10 other people who get to make the decisions, even though I'm the one working on the project, right? And that's just the management like style. So the forms issue, like where they're located, what kind of information you need to put on them, like how you make it easy to both get certain forms, like say you have an assumption of risk for students when they go out someplace, they need to basically say that we're going to like not hold the university liable, right? And this all goes through Patricia's office and the service center. And those assumptions of risks, we're responsible for like actually holding on to them, right? There's no like actual depository where they go, where the university holds on to them. So when they were all physical paper and we used to just like have them sign it. I would just get like a stack of them and have to like put them up in my
And you didn't
office.
scan them into a folder?
Nobody ever gave me any information about how this would work, right? And so but it bugged me, right? Because it didn't seem like it was a very useful or like effective way of doing it. It was almost seemed like it was not with any value, because if something happened, where would these be? Who would have access to them? What if I left, right? And so I think that thinking about a way to like have an online form depository where the students can sign them and then they are stored somewhere. And I think ES has been doing this, using this program called Presence. And Jamie, I'm looking at you to just verify if that's correct. Okay. And so this is like an external facing, it's mostly being used by students for like club activities, but some of our programs like ES and I think communications, I don't know if Alina can confirm that or not.
OEL, I think also.
OEL, like people who often are, I think maybe environmental education, you know, those that are often taking students off campus are using it in a way to like have all the forms. And of course, those assumption of risk forms need to be personalized, right, to your program. So you can get the personalized assumption of risk form into this place and the students can sign it there. And then it's stored kind of there, right? So I haven't used this yet. This is what Brent and I spent a lot of time like talking to Jessica Hayward, who's in student services. So she's on the student services, student like life side, but this becomes a potential place where we could like cross between like academic and student life and utilize a similar platform. The only problem is they're looking at maybe not changing it to a different platform soon because there's something about Presence that is not super, like they have some problems, they're not really totally happy with it. And so it may change to another thing like Presence. And this of course continues to like sort of illustrate how like our systems are constantly changing and how we constantly are getting new like tools and platforms to use. And that can be also a barrier, right, to wanting to do any of this, because then you do all the work to get it up here and then you have to.
So we're doing it all
reinvent
online. Collect the forms, drop them in your copier, scan them into a file it under the course name. It's not done dependent on the software and it can live in box.
I still think that if we had a way, and so this is one of the gaps, where the forms could be created and they wouldn't be stored by an individual faculty, but they were stored by the university. You know, I think, I honestly, it seems like that makes a lot of sense if the university is the one that's concerned about like the risk and the insurance, that they should be the ones, we should be storing those collectively. It also seems over time, you would be able to see what people have been doing, and that would actually be data in that would be important and, you know, informative. And then we asked Patricia, we met with her and we were talking about some of these issues, and we kind of talked about, could we have a flow chart? Could we have a flow chart where like, this is where your start is, and if you want to do this, you go here, you know, and she was hesitant to say yes. She, you know, I think probably because systems change so much and who you go to can change so much that it may not be that helpful to actually create a physical representation of the work. But I still think something like that could be useful, even if it was reproduced each year, like kind of like we get that. I've really liked that. It's like a magnet that student life is, or the university has produced to tell us like important dates. I was like, well, what if you update something like that every year and we get like a new version of it? It might be helpful. But of course, then it takes time and energy from their work when they're still short staffed and trying to do a lot, you know, with a smaller team of people.
So there's a couple things that could feed into this that are sort of underway. One is that Vince and Karen are working on a chairs manual that'll actually be website based, that will have links to a number of things. Depending on what my assignments are for fall, I may end up leading a group to work on a similar type of thing for faculty. And it would have a place where dates coming up would be a place to go to. I need to find this type of thing to give more of a one-stop place to grab stuff. I don't want to promise because that's
saying yes, the chairs
be
manual.
more.
please.
But the chairs manual, the goal is to have it out in the fall, and then if I can work on the faculty piece, that work will probably start in the fall.
Nice.
I need to add to the forms for just a minute, some things to add. So I've been doing this since 2007, and at first I just did it, and I send out 50 kids out into the world in groups of 5 to different agencies. get there and here you get this day off of class, but go do your thing. And then as the years go by, I'm like, oh, what's gonna happen to them when they die on the road? You know, so then I created a form like, you all need to have an emergency contact physically with you of the other person. You know, like, there are so many things beyond hold harmless and, which I didn't even know the word hold harmless until I was in the social justice house. And I was like, oh, this form, I should be using it. This is 7 years into me teaching class. And so like, I started using it. I'm using a hold harmless form from 2007. Like, I have no idea where a new hold harmless is, nor do I know exactly what you're saying. So like, hold harmless PR, no one ever teaches us, oh, if you have to have everyone sign something if their picture is being put somewhere. Never was taught that. Just knowing like these little logistics and realizing when I think it's so great to send someone out, but I basically was like this for a long time and then realized, oh, I could get sued. And so then that's why I'm not sure if I could do it again until it's done right, because it's become that logistically.
I would say though that right now, what I can say is if somebody wanted to just do a community-based service learning thing right today, the place to go is right to Patricia.
Yeah.
So and she then gets the right people in the room. And so to me, that is actually a process that works, right? And she then works with whomever needs to be worked with. And sometimes you just link in the people who like all need to be involved in the conversation. And she asks the questions for the things that she needs and she follows up and she's very, very good. I mean, I it's tough because, and you know, when I, even saying that, I'm like, I'm putting all this weight on one human. It's not just the office, right? It's like really who she is.
But it is service management role and she has a package of forms that are used in multiple settings. So often she can just pull one of those and give them to you.
Yeah.
If you have a more specialized need, she's got that as a basis to work on adapting it. I have pushed her about some changes because I didn't want it to scare my partners. And she's receptive and understanding, but keeps kind of all the legalese in mind in doing that. So she is an excellent resource if you want to do that.
We got powwow at Phoenix High School put together with Patricia really fast, this trip to Vesper Meadow really fast, you know, and she's wonderful to work with. And so, you know, right at this moment, I think there's a very clear person who makes it very easy. Yeah. One last thing I want to say about presence though, and I think this was to somebody's point about sharing stories and making more visible the work, is that presence has like both an internal facing and an external facing. And so like the external facing, you can tell stories and sort of like put pictures and things up. And so I think that like that could be maybe linked to our story pages on our or maybe the stories that are created for that also get put on the stories on our. So I mean, just sharing
on our
that.
social, you know, that's what use social media.
Yeah, having a place to actually put stories and share about what happened when people, like, once people went, maybe a place for the students to all put photographs, you know, into a location. That's always been something I've had a hard time getting the students who take
The
pictures.
celebration of what has happened.
Yeah,
Is
right.
that- And I think that's definitely true.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, now, and then we have a record too of the things we've been doing. It wasn't just like the second it's over, it's like it never happened. It's just sometimes how it feels.
But maybe if there was a CBSL center, that would be great.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's all I got.
I'm assuming you wrote down all those things you learned, you and read, like,
Mhm.
I mean, like, you, and that's a meeting document, yeah.
Yeah, there will come a final report from our innovation community.
It's
and
just the wisdom that they gathered in sitting together. is so
Absolutely.
valuable, Yeah.
Yeah,
Can you
we're
make
gonna,
sure it gets to the director?
absolutely.
I would like to know, I'd be curious on like, how many faculty members are Patricia? Like,
Right.
what would, I don't even know Patricia's last name.
Sequoia. It's very hard to
And
spell.
so, like, my point is that I'm glad
And
you
McLean.
have that connection, but I have no idea.
Well, that's
who
what I'm
that
saying, is
person
you have to know, like, that's what I would just suggest to
That's what you
people
wrote
right
down.
now is go right to Patricia, because like, she can make your life easier, but yes, you have to know Patricia's there.
And there's a systemic thing, right? Because I'm a little fearful for her, like, she's gonna get like 10 emails this afternoon, like, hey, can you help me out with this?
Well, we're trying to streamline this a little bit in that filter it through the division system so that, that like Patricia and others on campus should not have to.
See, that's
do it.
going to be very dependent on which division you're in, again,
Well,
whether you
yeah.
have people that actually know how to do that.
So we're working with, the division offices are not very heavily staffed, as you all know. That was part of the streamlining when we split into divisions. But we're trying to look at, I compiled with the help of the directors a list of what I believe are the frustrations that faculty have been feeling about being absolutely overwhelmed in the last 2 years. And so we've been kind of working through that and looking at, are there some things within our power that we can do to make some of this easier? And one thing is just knowing who to contact when, because everybody has changed roles and it makes some of these processes harder. Another is to try to find a way to make the pass-through processes easily locatable. So you don't have to know the right person or have memorized the right website where it lives on, that suddenly it moved from because they redid their website, you lost it you've always used. So we're trying to work on some of these things, but it's slow because it's not all within our purview in academic affairs. And so it takes partnering with some of the other areas and bringing them on board to understand some of those complications. The most interesting thing in doing that project was that no one thing was huge. The problem was the quantity of them. So that each person thought, oh, this is a little ask. The problem is 50 little asks is not a little ask. But the individual making that ask only knows about theirs.
Yeah.
And so the other piece we're trying to do is to see if we can't get people to better go through us and treat us like your supervisors, even though we don't act very supervisory to faculty, but to give us the opportunity to protect you some so that you can do the things that you want to do, but that we can control the inflow of asks. I even had one recently about, well, why wouldn't your faculty want to move offices in May before the term is up? And I had to just explain what a faculty member's life is like in May and June, because they have no concept of that because that's not part of their life. And if they can come through us and we can, condition some of those asks, it can make a difference. And this is among them. But I realize it is challenging on our hands too. And we are trying to be sensitive and address some of these things. And I'm sorry I don't have rapid fixes for them. I wish I did.
It's great that you guys are here, and I know that you'll be communicating with your colleagues, and this is definitely good, more good lunch discussions when we have the breakouts.
How do you get your students to sites?
That's another question. So along the way, along my, what is this, 15-year odyssey, like, they're driving themselves. Is that on me? And I don't know if that's bad. I know that my husband hates bands, but that's not gonna work in the situation. And I know that, yeah, so I don't have the answer, because I've never really been told.
These are
There's
some good,
bands,
these
there's-
are, I'm gonna,
So
I have a
question.
proposal.
yeah, I'm hungry.
We're small
Because we have
enough, we
more to
envisioned
present.
presenting and then breaking out while we eat.
Right.
But I think we're small enough, I think we can just
Stay in the
have the
group.
conversation as we go through. But I have a proposal that we go get food, come back, and then just keep going through it at the casual pace that we're going at. Is that okay?
That-
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And for those online, if you guys want to take like a little break or something, just for 5 minutes for us to grab
How about
food.
15?
15?
Let's do grab food and.
It's gonna take a while for us to get through the lunch.
10 minutes?
Okay.
Oh, and Eva's there. Hi, Eva.
Hello. To finish up this section, though, I want to say that along with other activities that are happening on campus, Ava and Vince is not here. Vince and there's another group that somewhat overlaps with our group is working on a proposal for a center for research and community engagement. And if that goes through, that will bring a lot of support to these.
That's going to President Bailey like this next week.
Yeah.
Is it going to be attached to your office though?
No.
No.
No, I think it'll be a different
It'll be
center. It'll be another
coordinated
center. It'll be like a parallel center.
Mimic,
Sister
yeah.
center.
It seems like it should be deeply interfacing.
Is it a
Would
center
would
for
definitely be-
specific division?
Nope.
Or is it
No,
all
Vin-
fun?
Vince has a real vision for this that I think is going to be great. But it is something that comes out of some needs from his division, but it is meant to serve all divisions.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be cross-divisional. We'll all be able to access it. And they're looking at a small amount of staffing, similar to the way that Cabell isn't hugely staffed, but that we've got some very capable people in there that we can turn to and really get answers and assistance from. They'll still focus more on the teaching and learning, and this will focus more on the things that go external to campus. So community partners, internships, research.
So the process, Ava was working on it separately, trying to solve needs that she saw and Chelsea Rose saw.
Mhm.
Brett got involved partly through the work that Brett and Brooke did. I got involved, so people brought a lot of their different problems and proposals to the process. And then a couple of weeks ago, we had a facilitator bring all of that together and produce a final report.
This reminded me that Brett had one other thing, and he would probably talk about it because he was here, that he was suggesting people like maybe do these innovation like pop-ups where student-based community or the community-based service learning could happen on campus. Students would like run a pop-up on campus to do something, right? And so he had this idea of like, yeah, like, like pop-up restaurant, right? But it's a pop-up, service learning activity, students as teachers. And then we've talked also with the Ollie campus, and we were like, they have infrastructure too, right? So there's potential relationship there as well for that kind of idea. Oh, cool. He would talk about it more.
Brett has a wealth of innovative ideas that are really worth exploring. So let's take a
Yeah, let's
break
take a
real
little
quick, grab
break.
some food, and then we can continue.
Grab your lunch at home.